and welcome to another edition of Exclusive Interview, coming to you from the studios of 84 TV Radio, Abuja, Nigeria. My name is Stanley Bentu. Now, do you know that Nigeria has existed for 120 years as a corporate entity? It has also existed for 106 years as a country, and then for 60 as a sovereign nation. And throughout that period, we have gone through 3 major stages of development. What are those stages? Well, that's what we're going to find out today. But first, have a look at this report.
Nigeria, a beloved country of huge potential, but with challenges to match. Agriculture has always promised to be the go-to solution to move the country to prosperity. But industrialization is what will provide sustainable growth. But what are some of the key factors Nigeria needs to achieve industrialization? We need an entrepreneurial class that is outward-looking and confidently seeking global opportunities. Knowledge creation and development system that sources and adapts the best knowledge globally. Institutions to support a global focus, educational, financial, trade facilitation, etc. A workforce and talent pool that is trainable, adaptable, well-educated, a flexible labor market enabling agility in firms. A macroeconomic environment that is coherent, price stability, competitive market-determined currency, transparency, and undergirded by formal institutionalized long-term policy framework certainty by state economic planners. On Exclusive Interview today, we speak to Dr. Muzali Dantata, founder of the Zuma Institute and former Chief Executive Officer of the National Institute for Hospitality and Tourism. Dr. Muzali Dantata is a lawyer by training with a master's degree in international finance law and a doctorate degree in multiculturalism. He speaks about his interpretation of Nigeria, which he describes as a land of green fields and blue skies, a metaphor for our agricultural past and technological potential.
I'm now joined by Dr. Muzali Dantata, who's the founder of the Zuma Institute. Doctor, it's a pleasure to have you on Exclusive Interview.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Well, I had the pleasure and the honor of being at the art exhibition that talks about Nigeria moving from green to blue. Green meaning agriculture, blue meaning technology that we dream of. It's something that, first and foremost, I would like you to explain to us, this concept of green to blue.
Well, thank you. As you know, Nigeria just celebrated its Diamond Jubilee, which is 60 years, as a sovereign country from 1960 to the 2020 that we're in. But I wanted to be innovative, and I said, we can't tell a full story of Nigeria without going back to the beginning when Nigeria was created. It was created in 1900. That is exactly 60 years. So you have 260 years to reflect. The first 60 years was the years of colonization, 1900 to 1960. And these are the years that I call the green years, because during those years, the colonial power, that is Britain, intentionally kept Nigeria green. That is to say, mainly agricultural-based economy, producing cocoa, palm kernel, cotton, granules, and so on and so forth.
All kinds of commodities.
All kinds of commodities, and including a few mineral products like, tin, like coal, columbite, but mostly agricultural produce. The Industrial Revolution had just taken place about 50 years earlier in the mid-1800s, and a lot of factories were propping up, and that is the beginning of modern technology. So in history, it's regarded as the beginning, if even of modernization. When factories started springing up in Europe, the revolution started in Europe and then spread to America.
Doctor, I never really saw it this way until you just mentioned it.
Yes.
The tie between colonization and the Industrial Revolution.
Yes.
Because this is happening roughly at about the same time.
Exactly, not even roughly, the same time.
The same time. So technology was seen as something to be a guarded secret to those who wielded it.
Yeah.
And then those who didn't served as suppliers of raw material.
And that was also the third angle. Also, it was also the end of slave trade, because they didn't need the slaves anymore. Now technology, has made the slaves redundant. You have fewer people doing more work, even in the farms, with machines, with tools, with tractors. So, and then that's when they started abolishing the trade, and that's when they started saying slavery is bad. And the transatlantic slavery, came to a halt almost the same time, just after the Industrial Revolution. They didn't need the slaves, so, and that's when they now, converted their interest from human beings to land. And that's the beginning of the famous scramble for Africa, if you have heard that terminology.
Scramble for and partition.
Before they were staying, the European powers were staying in the ports, the seaports, and they created seaports like Lagos, like Freetown, like Accra, but they never moved to the hinterland. All the slaves, were kidnapped in the hinterland and brought to the coastal area and loaded. So when the scramble for Africa started, they now started moving upwards and grabbing land. It's like whoever comes first and put up their flag, they claim that land. So Britain claimed Nigeria and got Nigeria at the Berlin Conference, I think 1855 or thereabout. So coming back to the story of Nigeria, so by 1900, Britain had decided to take over and officially declare, because before it allowed British companies like the Royal Niger
Company.
Yes, they gave them concession.
So Nigeria was basically a product run
by a company. So now Britain took over. So in 1900 they lowered the flag, the flag of Royal Niger Company, and they put up the Union Jack of the British company. And then the same Lord Lugard, who was working for Royal Niger, they said, hold on, we need you. So he now converted from being an employee in a private company, running, northern Nigeria from Lokoja, and somebody was in Calabar, and somebody was in Lagos, but Lugard was in Lokoja at that time. So in Lokoja, they just changed the flags, and now he became the first Governor General, supposedly of northern Niger Proctorate, but with powers over also southern Nigeria. So in the beginning there were two Nigerias, but with Lugard holding supreme, over both. Then by 1914 they decided to merge the two Nigerias into one unified country, and that's why it's called the amalgamation. When the two protectorates were united,
country.
They became one country. So in all those that period, Nigeria was producing raw materials, like cotton, granite, cocoa, rubber. So, and all these, factories were waiting for these raw materials in the UK, and what they didn't need, they sell to the rest of Europe, and the railway was established. The first railway was Lagos to Kano, but then eventually they diversified. But one principle behind the railway was there must be a good. For example, it went to Jos for the tin, and then it went to Port Harcourt for palm kernel, and then to Enugu for coal, and then all the way to Maiduguri for hides and skin and columbine. So the train, and of course there was cocoa in Ibadan, but that was also on the road to Jebba, to Kaduna, and to Kano. So the railway never came to your town if you didn't have any product. Passengers were by the way.
It was business all the way.
It's a good strain. So, and that's the mainstay of the economy, export of raw material up to 1960. And we did well with exporting raw material. Nigeria was number one in the export of granules in the world, the number one exporter of granules. And Kano was the depot. So granule from all over the north, came to Kano and was loaded on the train. And Nigeria was also number 2 at one time in cocoa, and it fell to number 3, behind Ivory Coast, and Ghana. And Nigeria also, I don't know that it was ever number one in palm, which is the same palm produce that was taken to Malaysia during the colonial period when Britain was ruling both Nigeria and Malaysia. And today I think Malaysia is number one in palm produce.
That's right.
Yes.
So, well, here we are at this stage where we're exporting raw materials, and probably this is what we were set up for. Until we found out that this was not enough.
Yes.
We have to do something more.
That's right.
So how was the journey at that point, at this crossroad?
Okay, from 1961 we became independent. It became a policy of the federal government to go into manufacturing, to catch up with the rest of the world in technology. So, and also infrastructure, building more roads and bridges, but essentially the factories started coming up. All the factories you see in Lagos, they literally came up in the 60s, because during the colonial era, nobody was allowed to manufacture. At best, some big companies had, factories where they can assemble what they bring in from the mother country. So from 1960, the factories started springing up, including Kano, textiles, oil mills, you name it, So, and that was the beginning of like our industrialization, but unfortunately, oil came up and there was demand crude oil, and Nigerian crude oil was very popular. So
well, hold that thought, Doctor, because we'll have to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the effects of crude oil and how that has affected our industrialization process. Don't go away. Welcome back to Exclusive Interview. Well, I'm still having a chat with Dr. Munzali Ntata, the founder of the Zuma Institute. And we're talking about Nigeria, green to blue, moving from an agrarian economy to an industrial one. And you've walked us through everything that happened right from the colonial times to when we got our independence, and also the effort of the earlier administrations to industrialize Nigeria. Then oil came in. And then what happened next?
Well, when oil came in, it affected all the other sectors, including agriculture, including manufacturing. Basically, those are the two leading industries, but everything.
And it's interesting because oil is a raw material, like all of these
others. It's a raw material itself.
But the demand for it was so much.
So much, that's right.
That it became seemingly a money spinner.
Yes, it did. And Nigeria became a leading oil exporter. I think it went up to number 6 in OPEC. And by the 70s, we literally stopped producing anything for export. And at its peak, I think crude oil supplied as much as 50% of the hard currency that came into this country from export. So the main export, and also the main revenue earner for the federal government. And the federal government did not care so much about collecting taxes and other
even
revenue.
Today, it's at 70 to 80%.
Yes, so even today. So, and I think that is the beginning of the descent in the economy, which went on through many administrations. So we failed in our quest to become a manufacturing country, so to say, blue country. If we're using the color blue for technology. So, and today at 60, we have not gotten anywhere. We are still just, exporting oil. So we're neither exporting finished products or exporting raw materials. So, and that's when I came up with this initiative. I said, we are now at a crossroad. But I want to delve, to the international arena. Because when technology now took center stage, since the Industrial Revolution, there was no turning back. It has been driving the world economy ever since, and leading to the second revolution, which is the information communication technology revolution, which is famously called ICT. When by then technology has consolidated as the main driver of the economy. You have gadgets coming up, like these smartphones, like international satellite TV stations. Before you watch local TV in your own hometown, network, and then some programs or network. But now everything is network. You have, if you go on DSTV, you have a choice of 100 network in a station which are all international. So technology took over. All those new gadgets were coming up. TV were no more big and bulky. You have the LCD, and all that. And the internet. Then robots came up.
Artificial
intelligence. Today, a factory that may employ 100,000 today, they will not have more than 1,000 running, because machines doing the work, and the 1,000 are just to keep check on the tabs on the machine for quality control. If any machine is misbehaving, they now put it back right. Take for example a bank. Today, how many times do you go to the bank? You could spend literally 5-10 years without stepping into a bank. Transfer will be made to your account, and you also can make transfer, and then when you need cash, you go to the ATM to either collect or even to deposit for somebody or for yourself. So you can find that maybe 2-3 people could run a branch, and before maybe 100 people will run a branch, 200 people run a branch.
So that
affected the labor market.
This is the age where Nigeria also has this exploding population of young
That's
people.
right. And unfortunately, in the world now, the unemployment is growing, and then there's a concern for climate change, so which are opposing, climate change, which is the conservationists, are now turning the world back to green, saying that technology is not the answer. So at the time when African countries like Nigeria are trying to catch up in blue, and then the world is trying to go green, which is still going green with renewable energy. So when I look at all those conflicting interests, and that's when I came up with the Greenfield Blue Skies, to signify that the blue and green are not necessarily on the same path. So at 120 years as a corporate entity, out of which 60 years as a sovereign, as opposed to the 60 years as a colony, so we are at a crossroad. Do we go back to the green that did well for us during the colonial era, even though we were a dominion of another country? Or do we continue with the blue and just double our efforts and say technology is it?
Or do we do both?
Or do we do both? So
can we do both?
Of course, it's even necessary we have to do both. None of the two could survive on its own. For example, you cannot grow food on computers or on satellite stations. You have to grow food on the land, on the Mother Earth.
But the food we grow can't be subsistence now. Of course, we probably have to maintain some level of subsistence for employment purposes. But if we're going to compete, it has to be mechanized.
Yes, so it is. But agriculture is still relevant then to produce the food. And then agriculture also impacted by technology. For example, tractors, are products of technology. And even food processing is technology.
Greenhouses as well.
And greenhouses. So you find that now it's a combination of the green and blue, and which, if you look at the color wheel, that is where I came up with the cyan. When you combine blue and green. So it has to be a combination of two. And we have to add, but the bottom line is wealth and people, jobs for the people. So to me, technology is no good. It's only as good as how it is bettering the lives of the human beings. And you cannot better the lives of mankind without creating jobs, because otherwise you'll have a lot of idle people, And so there has to be a balance. The world, maybe Nigeria could initiate something, and Africa could, and try to sell it to the world that, look, we have to rein in technology because it's making a lot of people redundant. Otherwise, you have to pay salaries. Well, in the West, they have a lot of welfare programs. But what about, in other smaller countries, and if you now graduate, but you can't get a job because of technology, you can't get a job because robots are doing the job you could do. But it's not only affecting us, it's also affecting the West. I've seen a lot of programs I've read in newspapers where, in fact, in one country, I think about 5 years ago, there was even a demonstration. I think it was in Switzerland,
because technology
against computers. They even were bashing computers on the street.
Doctor, here is one area of which you are an expert, but recently has been affected by something other than technology. Even in countries that have struggled with technological development, they've always been able to rely on tourism and hospitality for job creation. But now we have the COVID-19 pandemic, and only heaven knows what next. Because if anything that this has taught us is that this can happen again. So how do we, is it even possible? Is the era of the hospitality industry at an end, or is there a way out?
Well, I'll not say outright it's at an end, but it's really the biggest challenge it has ever faced, ever. You know, and in fact, presently, things are almost at a standstill, especially in the last 6 months when the lockdown worldwide, you know, was at its peak. And mind you, the lockdown is still on and off. And just like you have the safety, you know, measures, you know, people to people, staying safe, it's also country to country. You know, all airports and seaports, you know, are being closed and on and off. Sometimes you open them and sometimes you close them again. So the most affected is the tourism industry. The planes stopped flying, the hotels were empty, the planes were empty, and travel agents and other, you know, practitioners were all affected, and it's still the same. You know, those who, you know, are not or are hardly affected, or those who are in the food industry and also the medical industry. You know, but otherwise, almost every other sector, because when you cannot come out, you know, to run your business, even schools have been affected. The students stayed, but the most affected, it has been said a number of times, is the tourism industry, because tourism is based on movement of people. And when people are not moving, they are being locked down, you know, then it affects the tourism practitioner.
Well, my final question to you, Doctor, before we round up this session is, you're a very talented artist, and but you studied law, and yet art and paintings are the language with which you choose to express your social political views. How did this come about? And it's also quite unusual to see a lot of people from the far northern part of the country choose this position. As a matter of fact, there are some people who have very strong apprehensions against it, perhaps as a result of religious beliefs. So how did you come about this, and how did you have you ever come in contact or against anyone who believed that you were compromising by choosing this medium to express yourself?
Well, first of all, I do not see any difference between a photograph and an artwork. If you don't want to paint an image of a person or an animal, a living thing, then you may also not want to photograph that person or that animal. And then, but of course, there are some things which may become of necessity. For example, you want to apply for a passport or a driver's license, and you have to provide a photograph. You know, so then you could restrict yourself to photography only for official documents. Well, of course, we all go to the studios and we take pictures, and we keep pictures even of loved ones, and especially the dearly departed. So there's no clear-cut, you know, position, you know, on art. You know, but one thing which is agreed, that is statues, you know. So because the principle which I learned since as a child is anything that has a shadow. So whether
three-dimensional.
So that is a statue, or whether a human being or an animal is a statue, you know, unless you make a statue of a building, of a house. There is no more a statue, because it's now a depiction of a house. But when you say statue, it's mostly of a living thing. So so that is the one which is not encouraged, you know. But paintings, I think there's no universal agreement that they are not allowed. And from childhood, I discovered that I have talent in art, and I've been top of my class in fine arts through primary school and secondary school. And it's a wonder, when I was going to university, I did not read fine art or architecture, something related with the arts. Somehow it's God's wish I read law, and I graduated as a lawyer, and had a brief practice as a lawyer before I went into tourism. And even then, I would say it's my love for the arts that guided me to tourism, because there's a lot of art in tourism.
Thank you very much, Doctor. It's been very enlightening speaking with you.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me.
Don't go away. We'll be right back. Well, if ever there was a history lesson about the journey of our country, that was it. Dr. Ntata was certainly candid, as he was, well, quite brilliant at explaining the Nigerian experience. If we're going to move our country forward, it means that as we stand today, we're going to have to look back to some of our best assets and also apply some of our best efforts for the future to combine agriculture and technology. And somehow we can create something unique, something new, something better for us, for our children, and for our children's children. And that's it on Exclusive Interview today. Until we come your way again next time, thank you for stopping by.